This episode of Monster Model Review, we have Wonderfest 2015, Part 2. On this episode, we have an exclusive interview with KNB EFX Group Incorporated co-founder, co-director, executive producer, and special effects supervisor of The Walking Dead, Greg Nicotero. Hosted by amazing figure modeler's own, Terry J. Webb. From models to The Walking Dead, Terry and Greg have a candid late-night interview. Be aware there are some spoilers to The Walking Dead if you're not caught up, and a little colorful language. Please sit back and enjoy two of the hobby's biggest fans talking about their favorite genre, monsters, zombies, and models.
Hi everyone, Terry J. Webb here at Wonderfest 2015 with the man, my friend Greg Nicotero, executive producer this year. He's got elevated for The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And he's a regular guest here at Wonderfest. It's been a couple of years though. How many years has it been?
It's been a while. I think it's been 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately and fortunately, we start filming The Walking Dead in May, so it usually conflicts.
Right.
So this year, I've kind of, in the last 2 years, sort of started painting and building kits again in my garage. I'm like, you know what? I want to go to Wonderfest. So I actually called the guys and said, hey, can I come to the show?
Surprised everybody.
And they're like, sure, do you want to do a panel? Do you want to sign? And do you want to talk to the fans? I would have done that anyway.
Right.
Because this place is family, you know.
Right.
That's what's so great about the show.
And remember your first year?
I'm trying to remember who I was here with. I think, was it Savini? And I'm trying to remember.
It was in the 90s. I remember that.
Oh,
we're on year 26 here, so it's kind of hard to remember.
Yeah.
You've been here several times.
I've been here about 5 times.
Right. And what's the best thing you like about Wonderfest?
I love the people.
Yeah.
You know, I had people coming up to me in the hallway today saying, hey, great to see you again. I'm like, that was 8 years ago. But, you know, they're just, it really is a family show. And the fans are so dedicated here. I had dinner with Marta Kristen, of course, me being the geek. I'm like, I get to have dinner with Judy Robinson. And then we went into the room, the contest room, and just walked around and looked at all the models. And it's amazing because that room seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, it's upwards of like 600 kits.
It's insane.
Yeah,
and
it's great to see them in the room.
Great stuff there, and it's inspirational for me. There was a diorama of Salem's Lot and had the bedroom with the
Right.
vampire kid floating in the window. And I'm like, why did I not think of that?
Right, and what's the one you like this year? He just showed me, he changed his phone.
I did. There was a Star Trek from the Way the Gun episode, and there was a little, I can't remember the alien's name.
Right, I can't either, but there's a recreation.
It was a cool alien.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I took a picture of it, and I was like, that should be my phone screensaver.
So let's go back in the Wayback Machine here.
Right.
You're from PA.
Yep.
And born and raised.
Yep. Pittsburgh.
So let's hear your model history back in the day.
Oh God! All right. So this is how it all started. I have an uncle whose name is Sam Nicotero, who's an actor who was in The Crazies, George Romero's movie. That's how I sort of got my interest in horror films, in movies, in models, everything. All really started with him. He read Famous Monsters magazine. And he sort of gave me my first Aurora. The first exposure. So it was, I'll never forget. So my parents would go out to dinner almost every Saturday night, and I would stay up. There was the TV show called Chiller Theater, right? And the host was Bill Cardell. Now Bill Cardell was an actor who was in Night of the Living Dead. He played the reporter. He's like, so Chief, how do you kill them? What do you do? Well, you know, you got to hit him in the head, burn him, and so Bill Cardell was that guy. So every Saturday night, my Saturday night was watching Chiller Theater and seeing the guy from Night of the Living Dead, and they would play monster movies. And my parents would go to dinner, and they would come home, and the next morning there would be a model kit. They would stop at the hobby shop and buy me a model kit every Saturday night. So I would wake up the next morning, and I would put together, if it was the Allosaurus, the Ravel Allosaurus with the saliva dripping off the tongue or whatever. Yeah. So it was all about monsters, and back then it was Testors paints and the what was the glue, the
Well, there
Was it Testors glue? What
Yeah,
was
it
the
would have
glue
been
that took forever?
The white and orange. It was,
Yeah.
Testors was one of them, and I forget the other brand. God,
But it was the clear glue. I think it was
Right.
Testors. But you'd have to like put all the pieces together and Scotch tape them, and then let it sit all night. So you could never build a kit like now. You have super
Hey, you
glue.
were advanced. You were using Scotch tape.
I was very
gluing my
proud.
pieces to my fingers.
I was very proud of myself. So I built all, and it was probably 72 because I never owned the original long box Auroras. I was
a square box kid too.
It was the square boxes.
Yeah. Well, do you remember this? My deal was Friday night I'd pick out the kit, and then I'd bang through it all weekend long. You know, I'd mix the paint inside the box lid, and the glue would be in the box lid. And once I got it done, you know, why they're so rare. I was just a kid. I'd throw all the stuff in the box. I'd have it done by Sunday night. Box went in the trash. And usually by July, it was blown up on July 4th.
You would put firecrackers in it. I did that a couple times. I think I blew up the Frankenstein at least 3 times. Right. But it's interesting because I never mixed the paints. Then it was just you buy the testers and you just kind of... And of course, the blood red was the color. Because everything, when you were a kid, you just covered everything in blood.
Yeah.
You know, the Phantom of the Opera, the prisoner behind the bars.
With the blood coming off
off the claws.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget. So in my bedroom, I had bunk beds with my younger brother, and we had a giant bookshelf. And at the top of the bookshelf, my grandfather had put a couple spades in the wall or studs in the wall, and put an extra shelf. And I put all my Auroras up there.
What was your first Aurora?
Creature from Black Lagoon.
All right, let's fast forward a little bit. When did you come in contact with garage kits? Let's go back. It would have been in the 80s.
Oh, shit.
Because you got some good garage kit stories.
I do. I feel like I was there right when it started because I want to probably say Danny Sirocco at Dimensional Designs was one of the first guys that I really connected with. But being in the makeup effects field, when sometimes work was hit and miss, that's what you would do in between shows. You would sculpt something and mold it, and then you'd drive down to KitCraft and you'd give them the kit, and then they would sell it. And I met Danny Sirocco, and he sold a lot of the kits that I had sculpted back then. But I want to say Rider Reanimator. I did a bunch of Outer Limits ones. I did a Harryhausen Hydra. I did like a Warner Brothers like Michigan J Frog kit. But I want to say that it might have been at a Fangoria convention when I first started realizing that people were doing resin kits. And at that point, I bought all of them. I mean, they were so fucking expensive.
What was your first resin kit? Do you remember?
Oh,
come on! It's like your first love.
I know.
I can't. Car and you can't remember.
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. I might want to say it might have been Golden Voyage of Sinbad masthead from Dimensional Designs. Yeah, that might have been the first one. But
so what made you wanted to sculpt one?
Because as an artist, I always go back to things that inspired me. So if you look at everything that I've ever built, it's always based on either like War of the Worlds or Time Machine or Ray Harryhausen,
the classics.
And I think with the Hydra was always the one creature that I loved. And you know, I ended up sculpting one head and then sculpting the entire body and then made the base. So it was a little wanky. Now, of course, I was like, God, why did I only sculpt one head? Because it's just kind of, you just have to cut it on an angle and reposition them. But it was just, I loved that. And I actually think the Jeff Yeager Curse of the Werewolf was also, and Mike Tursik's Demon from Legend.
Right.
I still have all.
I do too.
I still have all of them.
I'll be buried with those kits because they were ground zero for me. I think, especially the Curse of the Werewolf.
Yeah.
Like I told Jeff, you know, back in '87 when we would see that kit, there was absolutely nothing like that on the planet. And
the likenesses.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And Jeff Yeager really, still to this day, sets the bar for likenesses, because I would remember looking at resin kits and being like, if it didn't look like the character, then I wasn't interested.
Which was the big knock on all the Aurora kits. I love the Aurora kits, but good God, some of them were just, what were they thinking when they made them?
Yeah, but you know, in '72, when I was 9 years old, I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
I didn't care that it didn't. That Wolfman had like the big muscly chest, and he was never shirtless.
And the rope
on the
belt.
The rope belt. You know what's funny is that I never thought about it until I was older, because I didn't care. I was just like, that's cool. It's a monster. That's what you buy it for. But Jeff Yeager's stuff, really, the Curse of the Werewolf, and that likeness. I always felt that Jeff sort of set the bar. And the thing about that fucking guy was that he's an actor.
Yes.
He just did it as fun. He didn't even get paid to do it. He just did it because...
I told him if he started singing, he'd just be the triple threat.
I know. I hated the guy.
Where does it end?
Ironically, about a month ago, I bought a It Conquered the World Billiken off eBay, because somehow some of my kids in the years have somehow or another disappeared. And I was like, what? Where the hell did my It Conquered the World Billiken go? So I bought a new one, and I paid for it. I bought it off Jeff Yeager.
Oh, really?
So his wife is like, hey, by the way, we got lots of other Billikens if you're looking. And I was like, of course, of all people. I'm like, tell Jeff I said hello. But, you know, shit, it's...
Well, what's interesting, I think, I mean, as busy as a man you are, because we haven't gotten to KNB. But,
No.
you know, what I really like is that a lot of guys, you know, like modelers, that they stay true to their roots and everything. And he was just showing me earlier tonight on his phone the replacement heads that are really popular now for the Aurora kits and the reissues of them. And there he is. He's got all 5 of them lined up. And, you know, you were telling me you got 4 months off from the show.
Yeah.
And what have you been doing?
Well, we shoot Walking Dead from May to November. So the 3rd week of November we wrap. I go home. I have Thanksgiving dinner. I get drunk for a week, and then I recover, and I look around, and I'm like, oh, I got 4 weeks or 4 months off, which technically I don't, because KNB continues to work. We do other movies. But, you know, it's tremendously therapeutic for me. I rebuilt a whole section of my garage with a workbench, and my 10-year-old daughter and I sit out there, and I'm teaching her how to airbrush. So my daughter Alyssa and I sit out there, and the Mobius guy sent me the Forgotten Prisoner. Frank Winsper has been instrumental, actually. He sends me care packages, and he sent me the Forgotten Prisoner reissue. And I sat in the garage, and my 9-year-old daughter and I built the Forgotten Prisoner, and I taught her how to airbrush, and she painted hers. And we spent like a week just hanging out. And it was so much fun, just, you know, because nowadays people just buy toys and they're done. And
yeah, it's a ready-made world, and it sucks. But
yeah.
Speaking of Frank and Mobius and everything, I noticed I've been seeing some Mobius kits appearing in the episodes.
Oh, you saw that, didn't you?
And
Did he tell you about that?
No, I watched the episodes, and I'm like, well, you figured.
Thank you for noticing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, episode 9 of last season was one of the biggest episodes, because Tyrese gets bit and he dies, and we were doing set dressing, and I wanted they're like, oh, it's a kid's bedroom. I'm like, well, listen, if it's a kid's bedroom, there has to be some monster models in there. So I wrote Frank and said, I want to get permission. You have to get permission for everything.
On everything.
Nobody, you can't sneak anything in there. If you slide it in, they will digitally erase it from the episode.
Really?
They will go through every frame and they'll take it out. So I wrote Frank and said, I really want to put a couple models in the show. So we got permission to use Jekyll and Hyde, and we got permission to use The Forgotten Prisoner.
It wasn't by any chance the one your daughter did.
It was not. It wasn't.
That would have been.
But what was fun about it was, even in terms of the story arc, you know, Tyrese is going through this sort of emotional journey as he's bit, and how he's trying to deal with his impending death, and the emotion of that. And so I thought, well, Jekyll and Hyde is kind of like Chad Coleman's character. And then The Forgotten Prisoner is kind of like a zombie. So it actually fit within the theme of the show. And the first shot of the show is like a slow zoom in on a framed photo, and Jekyll and Hyde is right there.
Yep.
And I actually didn't even go to get approval from the producers. I just called the props guys and said, this is what I want to do, get permission, and here's my friend Frank Winsper, and call him. And it was my sort of homage to what we do. So the fact that I got those kits in there, thank God that you saw that.
Oh yeah, well, which is so cool.
I was really excited.
That's the cool thing about you. I mean, you never forget that stuff, and in this day and age, modeling's a dying art form. And any exposure that we can get out there, because on one of these days in the magazine, what I want to do is an article, Spot the Kit, because I'm sure you've seen through the years, they've snuck a lot of kits in.
Yeah.
I can remember watching Wayne's World, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's the one scene towards the end when they have to call Mr. Big, and I
don't remember.
Yeah, and I forget not Wayne, but Garth.
Yeah.
He's on his computer, and they're trying to hook up with a link or whatever. And if you look on the keyboard, there is a Phantom kit. I believe it's a Horizon Phantom kit.
Oh, wow.
And all through the years, I've spied these kits in little movies. And I'm like, God, that is so cool that these guys are trying to keep this alive and keep model building in there in just a little, subconscious way.
But Terry, thank you for noticing that, because, listen, I because I'm a makeup effects artist at heart, and everybody's like, well, CGI is sort of demolishing any makeup effects credibility and art. I disagree with that. I always feel like every artist provides a certain tool, and especially in filmmaking, it all makes sense. But there, you have to sort of fight that.
And it probably gets harder every year as it goes by.
It does, but what I find fascinating is, in terms of makeup effects, now you have directors that are coming into their own, that either, number one, were makeup effects artists or love the art, like Guillermo del Toro, who was a makeup effects artist. Yeah. So he embraces that, even though he has a lot of CGI. There's tons of practical stuff.
And he's another fan of model building. He's actually bought kits off of me at Monsterpalooza.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to Monsterpalooza and you're walking down the aisle and you see Guillermo and you see Frank Darabont, and you're there with your friends and they're celebrating Robert Rodriguez. Robert and I used to paint models together at my house, and I'll never forget, we were prepping to do The Faculty. So this was 1998. And he came to L.A. We went to Creature Features.
Very underrated film. I enjoyed that very much.
It's a fun movie. Yeah. We went to Creature Features. We bought a bunch of model kits. And we got back to my house, and we were talking about Evil Dead 2. And I said, oh, yeah, I worked on that movie. And I have like 6 hours of footage I shot behind the scenes. So we put on the 6 hours of footage while we were sitting there grinding fiberglass and grinding resin in my living room.
Yeah. Which is I've heard the story about you, and I don't to maybe tell a story, but he gets together with his friends, some movie friends and some just friends, have like a round table. I'm not sure if you still do it.
I haven't done it in a long time.
But you get these model jams going. So tell the people about like Greg Nicotero model jam night.
In the heyday of the resin kits, we did that all the time. I would invite people over, and I'm like, everybody has to come. You got to bring a kit, and you got to bring a movie, and we would watch like Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and some people would just sit and drink beer, and bring a kit but not do anything. But then there was always the table in the corner, and you'd hear dremeling, and like the whole living room was just filled with resin dust within an hour.
And there you are with people like Frank Darabont,
Dave Scow and I, Dave wrote an article about it in Fangoria magazine.
I remember seeing that. It was in the early 90s. That's how I knew about it.
It was so much fun because we would all just get together and build models, and I love that idea of it being a community experience. Because model making is a community experience. If Wonderfest shows us nothing, it shows us that there is a community that celebrates this. And that's what's exciting about it. It's fun to sit there and paint something in your garage by yourself, but when you can turn next to somebody and go, oh my God, check this out.
Yeah, and share the feeling, because I always said, modeling to me was like a solitary activity.
Yeah,
and,
well, it is.
Getting together with friends, put on the movies, or like a lot of times I just turn up the music and whatever. But get together with friends, and there's just nothing like it. I mean, it's the best therapy in the world, and so many people are missing out on that now.
I know, and there are guys. There's a guy named Gene Kozicki who's a miniature model builder in L.A., and they do a thing now called Geek Night, and I get emails from him, and they all get together and they bring model kits and they hang out and watch movies and drink beer, and I was like, hey, that's a good idea. I wish I would have thought of that.
Yeah.
Because I did think of that.
Been there, done that, huh?
But it's really funny. I mean, you know, listen, the truth of the matter is, as we get older, and everybody has kids, and then you have your priorities shift.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that your inspirations never change. The things that inspire you, the things that ignite you, they're still there. You might forget about it for a little while, or you might be preoccupied with, oh, I have a 4-year-old daughter, or I have this, or I have that. But the bottom line is that if it's something that inspires you, if it's something that keeps you creative and keeps the pencil sharp, then that's what defines who you are as an artist.
Yeah.
And I love that.
You'll never forget it. You'll always come back to it.
You don't forget it.
Right.
And I feel like it's funny because I was sitting in my garage painting those replacement heads, and I was putting the little tiny red line inside the lower eyelid. And of course I have like these glasses and giant magnifying glasses and like so much light. And I'm like, fuck, I'm old. I don't remember needing 15 magnifying glasses to paint a line.
Yeah.
But then
it's interesting you say that because I got to be 44 when my eyes went. I like the super deforms. And I go to paint a super deform and I'm like, shit, I can't see this thing anymore. So the magnivisor is my best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you hit, in 2004 was when I got my glasses. So I was 41. And I remember showing up on set and Quentin Tarantino was like, what's with the glasses? I went, you'll see. Don't you worry. One of these days, you're going to need them as well. But the fun thing about it is that, of course, you put everything on and you're sitting there painting, but you get a chance to see everything so intimately. And then the paint jobs are better.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, how do they paint like that? I'm like, listen, there's all sorts of magnification. That's the secret. Because when you have it right there, you're by yourself, you're all quiet, and you're like, I gotta get that eye right. Gotta get that iris in there. You know?
And if it's not right, you'll just never look at it. But, you know, one of the things I teach all the makeup artists that work for me on The Walking Dead is, because, you know, when you're working on something like that, you're really close. Like, if I was doing a zombie makeup on you, I'd be painting this eye and painting that eye. And I always encourage them, like, I step back. Because when the camera's filming a big zombie scene, you're not going to be right here. The camera's going to be further back. Same as the model kit. When you look at a model kit, you're not going to look at the head like this. You're going to put it on your shelf, and you're going to look at it, and it has to...
Most people view it from several feet away. And,
yes.
And it all comes together.
But it has to come together. But those little details and those little nuances bring it to life. And I was showing my daughter, I was like, you get a little brush, and you put a little dot of white, and you put the white dot right in the eye, and it all of a sudden it's a reflection. She was like, wow, that looks real, Dad. And I was like, damn right it does.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the show. How did you first get involved with the show?
Well, Frank Darabont and I have been friends for decades, and we had a very, very interesting dinner one night. He did a lot of.
Cook it for you, did he?
He didn't.
Yeah.
I know he's cooked dinner for many of us.
Yeah.
We went out to dinner. It was around Christmas. I can't remember what year. But he had done rewrites on the Indiana Jones movie. And I read a script for a zombie movie that was really good. And it didn't end up getting made, but it was about 2 Border Patrol officers that were dealing with people coming in from Mexico to the United States during a zombie apocalypse. And one of the guys' family lived in Mexico, so he had to go into Mexico during what became a zombie outbreak. It was a really good story. And I said to Frank, I'm like, this would be a really cool movie. We should make this. What do you think? And he's like, I've always wanted to do a zombie show. I've just never found the right story. And cut to a couple years later when he said, I found the story. I don't want to do a movie. It's a TV show. You have to be able to tell the story over and over again and expand on what happens to our characters. So he gave me the copy of the first draft of The Walking Dead. And I, of course, had read the comic book, so I knew exactly what it was. So we sculpted a couple zombie busts. And when he went around pitching the show, he took these zombie busts. And when people would say, well, this is interesting and it's really well written, but how are you going to do the zombies? And he's like, oh, I Yeah, my friend Greg
I got to see your
Nicotero.
weapon. Greg Nicotero.
He said my friend Greg, came up in the ranks through George Romero and Tom Savini and worked on Day of the Dead and all these movies.
Which
so
just segues right into it. I'm not sure if a lot of people know that, your history and whatnot. The zombie genre.
I know.
I'm sure all the fans do, but yeah, it was serendipitous that you ended up with the assignment.
Well, it was a dream come true for me, and I was involved with the show before it was ever even sold. When they pitched it to HBO and NBC, and when they were taking it around, everyone's like, "No one's gonna watch it."
Nobody wants to watch it. Turned on by a lot of people.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the woman who was head of production at HBO, who's a good friend of mine, really wanted to do it, and they were doing True Blood, and somebody said, "Well, we already have a zombie show. We already have a vampire show, so we don't want to do another
zombie show.
Why would we do a zombie show?" And my friend was just devastated because she knew that it had potential. So the truth of the matter is that Frank, in all of his infinite wisdom, put a great cast together, a great story together, and we're in the beginning stages of season 6. We've been doing it for 6 years.
It's absolutely phenomenal. I don't know how it's gone worldwide, but I heard it was over in Japan.
Crazy.
Were you over in Japan with Norman? And did you
I was with Norman, and I was with Andy, and what's weird is that I'm a behind the scenes guy. Right. I'm a producer on the show and makeup effects and director, and people stop me on the street and they just want to say thank you. Right. What's fascinating about The Walking Dead is that somehow or another it's bridged this gap. The show is a communal experience. I've had people say to me, I was in the hospital for 6 months nursing a disease or an injury, and I Sunday nights kept me going because I look forward to watching The Walking Dead. I've had people that have told me that it brings their families together. They're like, our teenagers don't
Which is so strange.
Teenagers don't care about us, but on Sunday nights they would get together and they would watch the show. So those stories move me because
it's funny you say that. My son Vinny, he was never into any of this stuff, and one night he started watching it, and he's just hooked on it.
But you can watch it. You can watch it. They have parties, and people go to bars and watch the show together. And I get emails and texts and messages from people going, "Yeah, we're at a bar up here. Come watch the show with us." And
time we see a zombie.
And there's 100 people there. So. Yeah. To me, when I'm walking down the street, I'll never forget. The funniest story was I was at a restaurant, and there was a son there who was 45 years old, and his mom who was in her 70s, and they were talking, and I couldn't help but overhear, and they were like, "Oh, it's so nice to see you, and thank you for picking me up," and they were just doing the niceties, and then at one point the mother said, "Listen, this is great, and I love seeing you, but Walking Dead's on tonight, and we gotta go." And I was blown away. I was just blown away that there was like a 65, 70-year-old woman who was like, "This is great, but my story's on. I gotta go watch my story."
Very good writing on the show and everything.
Well, our executive producer Scott Gimple is he's one of us. He's one of us. He gets it. He loves the genre. What's interesting for me as a filmmaker is you do shows where your contribution is either respected and appreciated or not. I've been on a lot of shows where they're like, "Yeah, what do you know?" And on The Walking Dead, people wanted my opinion, wanted my input, because they knew that I could contribute to the show and make the show better. I've directed 12 episodes, and to me, that's the greatest experience.
What's your favorite episode so far?
Oh shit, I don't know.
Is it tough to answer? I guess what your favorite kid is.
It is. It's hard because every single episode is different. And
well, let me ask you this: what's the toughest aspect of working on the show?
The toughest aspect is telling the story in the time frame. I was working on Django Unchained, and we had a 12-page scene, and we shot for 3 weeks, and it was after I had directed my first episode, and Quentin pulled me aside. We were sitting at lunch talking, and He's like, so tell me about, how did you like directing, your first experience? And I said, well, you know this scene that we have 3 weeks to shoot? I said, in TV you have 1 day. I said, I shot a 12-page scene with 15 actors in 1 day. And
it's got to be really stressful, though.
It's stressful only because you have producers behind you doing this. And,
really? They're really there doing
They're doing that, and I want to shoot all of them. But what I've learned, especially in the last couple episodes, is I just ignore them. I'm like, listen, I could spend, because what they'll say is they'll be like, how long do you need to shoot this scene? Well, 3 hours. Well, you have 2. Well, fine, I can shoot the scene in 2 hours. And then when we start shooting, I'll take 3 hours, because I'm not going to tell the actors, you have to act faster, because you're acting too slow. That's not the way you direct. You shoot the scene the way the scene needs to be told, so that the characters can be compelling, so the audience watches it and is engrossed by what we're doing. If every scene is, oh, you just put a camera and shoot close up, close up, close up, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I get myself into a lot of hot water on the show, because I shoot the show the way I feel the show needs to be shot, not how people tell me to shoot it.
Well, what's the most fun aspect of it? It's got to be the communal feel. I mean, all those actors together. I mean, when someone gets killed off, I'm sure it's got to be tough.
It sucks. Yeah. But I'll tell you, my enthusiasm for the show is equaled only by Andy Lincoln and Norman Reedus and Stephen Yeun and all the actors and the crew and everybody. I mean, everybody shows up ready to work. We wrapped last year, November 21st. A week later, I was on the phone with Norman and Andy, and we were like, when can we start shooting again? Let's go. This time off is bullshit. Let's start shooting. We were all ready to keep going. You know, you got to build your momentum, and you get going. And once you really start getting in the groove, you don't want to stop. And it takes a little while to get there, because you got to shake off the cobwebs of the couple months off. But once you start hitting on all cylinders, nobody wants to slow down. You're like, we're doing great. Why would we slow down? Why would you take your foot off the gas?
What is the zombie makeup you're most proud of so far in the 6 years?
Well, you know, we keep changing up the makeups every season. I think out of the gate, the Bicycle Girl makeup that we did in the first episode, it was funny because nobody knew what to call her, and I'm like, well, there's a bicycle, and she's a half zombie, so Bicycle Girl. And now that's her name. I just kind of said it as we should figure out what to call her, because
it's part of the lexicon of the whole show. Bicycle.
And what was interesting, I will give AMC a lot of credit, because there were a lot of people that were following us around, even back then, with their camera phones taking pictures. And we were like, we don't want to have pictures of crappy looking zombies out there before we even release our first photo. So AMC had said, we want to release a photo of her as here it is. This is The Walking Dead, and this is what you're about to see. So the first image ever released from The Walking Dead was that makeup.
That reaching out.
Yeah, the reaching out photo. And I think because that has been so well ingrained in people's minds and associating that look with what the show is, that's sort of how we set the bar. Right. Now, we do amazing makeups every season over and over again, and we constantly change things up, and we're constantly improving what we do. But that was the one that I think put us on the map.
Well, I'm curious, you know, you're a big fan of practical effects and keeping it alive, and then they obviously have to get the CGI in there. What's your thoughts on that? Did you fight that, or
no? You know, in the show, the reality is we have 8 days to shoot an episode. If we had to do practical blood hits on every zombie, what would happen is for take 2, you'd have 10 people going in, cleaning all the blood up, taking the clothes off the zombies, replacing the clothes with non-bloody clothes to do take 2. So what we realized at a very early time in the show was that we couldn't do that. You can't go in and change and reset every take, because you'd never get anything done in a day. So we went for the idea that you got to do digital blood hits in order to make our production schedule. So what we've done is we've worked very, very diligently every season to make the blood work look more and more realistic. You know, in the first season they used CG blood, and then we started shooting elements of real liquid and then compositing that onto the actual zombie. So the stuff that you're seeing is actual liquid that's recolored to look like zombie blood. So the digital effects get better and better and better every season.
So are you happy with it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it looks totally believable. I think
it does.
The perfect mix of
and again, you know, I mean, having the opportunity to be an executive producer on the show and working very closely with our digital effects team, I have a lot of input in what stuff looks like. And if it doesn't look real, then I'll be like, eh. There was one scene we did last year in episode 8, the episode where Beth gets killed, and Rick's running down an alleyway and he slices a zombie and all the guts pour out. In the first take, the cut was really low, like right at its belt line. And I said, guys, you missed the guts spilling out. I said, raise the cut up and angle it so that the audience gets a chance to see the cool gut spill. And they ended up modifying it, so when you see it now, it's like, oh, that looks great. But when they initially put it in there, they weren't thinking about the fact that even though Rick slices across the stomach and the guts pour out, that you see them for a split second and they fall out of frame. So it's little things like that that I'm able to actually guide and direct in terms of making sure that the gags work the best they can.
Well, another thing I want to ask you, you know, we were talking about this earlier about how the people come up to you and they say, you know, how much for your autograph and whatever. So I know you've been going out in the fan circuit, the show circuit and everything. How's that been going for you?
It's good. I mean, I don't really have a lot of chances to do shows. I do maybe 2 or 3 a year. But, you know, my first convention was 1975 in Pittsburgh. And it was a Star Trek convention, and William Shatner was there, and James Doohan was there. And I remember going into one of the dealer's rooms, and I met a guy who had a store in New York named Jerry Olinger. And he's like sort of the premier stills guy. Right. And I bought like some Jaws photos and some Towering Inferno photos and stuff. So to me, conventions provide not only an opportunity to meet with the fans, but also to sort of help you connect with something that you really love. And with The Walking Dead, people are already so connected to the show. And, you know, we have a show afterwards called The Talking Dead, which I sometimes appear on and talk about the making of the show. So people feel like they know me. So I have people that walk up to me.
As a show, which I thought was brilliant. I mean,
there's 6 million people watch The Talking Dead. Right. I mean, that's more people that watched Mad Men, which is crazy. But I will have people that walk up to me because they feel I'm accessible, because they've seen me in the behind-the-scenes footage, and then they see me on the show. And they just like, I just want to tell you I love your show.
So give us your crazy fan experience. Have you got a good story like that?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. I'm sure that I will. Yeah. Maybe even later tonight. Who knows?
Well, given the success of the show, I mean, how long do you think this can go? Because I mean, really, on one hand, it's a one-trick pony.
I would disagree very.
Well,
very
I mean, it's a one-trick pony in terms of it's an apocalyptic society. But on the other hand, given the popularity, it could go on for, you know, infinity.
Yeah, but listen, look at the apocalyptic society and understand that in order to survive in a world like that, you have to evolve and you have to change. And the one thing that our show does very well is our characters change. Rick Grimes isn't the same guy he was in season 1.
The metamorphosis has been, you know,
he has changed.
Fascinating.
Carol. Every character has changed, and our writers are very, very aware of that. So, to me, we're in season 6, and every year when we premiere our ratings, we break our own records. I think I've directed the episode that has the most viewers, and it was 21 million people. So aside from American Idol or Big Bang Theory, it's kind of up there with everything in the world. If somebody, I remember we did season 2, and Gail Ann Hurd at the rap party said, "You have to say something to everybody." I was like, well, "What am I going to say?" And like, "Well, everybody knows you, everyone loves you. You just have to say something." And I thought about it for a little bit, and I went up and I took the microphone and I said, "Listen," I said, "Twilight Zone, Star Trek, X-Files. Those shows changed the landscape of television, and they changed the way people watch TV. And I said, what every single person in this room should be proud of is that we are involved in a show now that is changing the way people watch TV and changing the landscape of television. And when you think of it that way, and you think about 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the way people look at Star Trek and the way people look at The Twilight Zone, people will look at The Walking Dead that way. And what's exciting for me is when my kids are 40 years old, they will say, oh, I was there. My kids were there when Michonne smashed the governor's head into a fish tank, and when Rick is riding the horse and the horse gets torn open. I have a picture of my daughter, 4 years old, sitting on a torn apart horse. She doesn't even remember it, but she was like, Dad, that's a great picture. She's 10 years old now. Yeah. But I gauged the show on my children growing up, and I think about the fact that 10 years from now, when my kids are in their 20s, they're going to look back and realize that they were there. They witnessed what we did when we contributed in changing the way people watch TV. And that's, to me, is
something to be very
amazing.
Proud of. Very.
It's so, it takes my breath away when I think about it, because I'm so proud of the fact that I'm part of a show that can do that.
I know the new series is starting in the summertime. Are you involved with that?
I am. I'm an executive producer on that, and we're doing the makeup effects.
So does it mean no more time for modeling? I mean, is this just going to go from one to
that.
another?
No,
I mean,
I'll find time.
Are you going to be able to handle everything?
Listen, I just bought on eBay a studio scale Y-wing, and I had it shipped to Georgia. So I'm figuring that sometime, like when we wrap shooting and I go home, I'll be working on the weathering, and I'll be building that, because I need that. I would never give it up, because to me it's therapy. You know.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, I could talk to you all night long.
I know, it's crazy.
We got some beers to drink and some fun to have.
I know, I'm almost out of this one.
One last question. Did you buy any kits at the show? Or
I did.
What'd you get?
I bought a Casey Love sculpted a little shock monster bust.
His new bust series.
I bought that. I bought a Audrey 2. I bought a couple zombie busts. I got what else did I get? Monsters of the Movies, Wolfman. I have a ton of stuff. Yeah.
So you got some stuff to build in.
I got stuff to build, and I just got to figure out how to get it all back to Georgia, because I brought a little tiny suitcase.
Do you have a little modeling stoolie down there on the set to work with?
I don't, but I do in my apartment. And Mike Salzo, I have his Battlestar Galactica that I got off him last year, and it's right in my condo in Georgia. And I saw Mike today, and he's like, "Hey, how's the Galactica?" I'm like, "It's right there. I see it every single day." So,
you are a fan of the big stuff. I've heard about the stuff you got around your pool.
I can't help it. Listen,
how many pieces do you have now?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. All I know is that I went into the model the contest room, and there was a big, like, 4-foot Pan Am.
Is that thing gorgeous or what?
And I was like, how much? I would love. And I said, the guy have molds? Is he making copies? Because it's beautiful, and I love walking through and looking at that stuff and being like, it takes your breath away. You know?
Yeah, to see it the scale.
It's great. I love the big. I love.
Oh,
the big
yeah.
Stuff, so.
All right. Well, listen, we're gonna have to cut this off here, but Greg, I want to thank you for the time.
Terry,
it's always a pleasure.
Anytime.
You know, we've always had a connection over models, so I wish you the best of luck on AMC's Walking Dead. And I would ask you something about the future, but I know you can't spill anything, so.
No, I can't. It's no fun.
But I'm sure.
I'll have 3 more of these, and I'll tell you whatever you want to know.
Yeah, I was just gonna have some more beers, and I'll get the secrets, and maybe we'll do another interview sometime. But anyhow, thank you very much for.
It's my pleasure
for coming here and for all the great work you've done on the show, but especially with the models. And
I know we could talk for 3 hours.
Oh,
easily.
No shit. I mean, this guy. There's a lot of guys I meet in hobby, and there's people have come and gone. I've been doing this almost for 30 years, and I fully expect that when. At the end of it, Greg's going to be there with the cockroaches and the radiation. And,
good.
You know,
I'll
And
be
that's a
driving
good
the
thing,
Damnation
right?
Alley truck filled with model kits.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So anyhow, I
Thanks,
want you
Terry.
with the best with the show, and I hope it goes for years to come, because I know there's only one thing or place I knew. Sunday night is there at the TV.
I'll keep it going as long as I can.
Thanks, Greg.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks to Greg Nicotero for taking the time for this interview. This could not have happened without the assistance of Terry J. Webb, and we want to thank them both for giving us this great interview. Coming up in part 3, Terry interviews master sculptor Tony CIPRIANO. You can find more shows, videos, reviews, and how-tos on our website, monstermodelreview.com, and you can find us on Facebook. For Chris Gierke and myself, Rob Mattison, thanks again for watching.